Welcome everyone to a new episode of biology. Today we will talk about the properties of water as an important component of life on Earth. Actually, life depends on hydrogen bonds in water. So let's talk about water more. Water expands when it freezes. Yes, for sure, you have experienced this before. If you put or if you get a glass and fill it with water, then cover it top tightly and put it in your freezer, then when it freezes, the glass will crack or will be broken because the water expands as it freezes. The solid water, the ice, is less dense than the liquid water. As you can see, and you have seen this a million times before, when you put some ice in a cup of water, the ice started to float to the surface because it is less dense than the liquid water. In ponds and lakes during winter, ice floats and covers the water's surface. Yes, this is very important. As you can see, this man here, this is not magic. He is up on ice. The ice acts as an insulator that allows the water underneath to remain a liquid. Yes, for any lake or a body of water, in winter, the upper layer starts to cool down and freeze. It becomes ice. So when it becomes ice, it continued to get cooler and cooler while insulating the lower part of the lake, so all the living organisms remain alive at about 4 degrees centigrade. The low density of the ice is related to the structure of the water molecule. So let's talk about the structure of the water molecule in the next slide. Water is a polar molecule. Polar, do you remember the magnet, which has a north pole and a south pole? Yes, these are poles or regions. Water is a polar molecule, but not north and south. This is much different. This is electrical charge. Polar molecules, they have a region with a slightly positive charge and a region with slightly negative charge. We will see how this happens. Polar molecules form when atoms have unequal pulls on the electrons they share. Do you remember when we talked about the covalent molecules? These molecules, they share electrons, the covalent bond. It is the bond that is made by sharing pairs of electrons between atoms. So in some cases, the electrons are pulled toward one of these atoms closer than the other. So the one that the electrons are pulled toward it, it gains a slightly negative charge, while the one that the electrons are pulled away from it, it gains a slightly negative charge. Then we have a polar molecule. This is what is the meaning of unequal pulls. Okay, in a molecule of water, the oxygen nucleus with its 8 protons attracts the electrons shared more strongly than do the hydrogen nuclei with only 1 proton each. So the oxygen atom gains a small negative charge because the electrons are pulled toward it, and the hydrogen atom gains, each hydrogen atom gains small positive charge, as you can see. Okay, so since we have polar molecules, also we have non-polar molecules. They do not have these charged regions because there is equal pulls of electrons, or the atoms in a molecule, in a non-polar molecule, share electrons more equally. Okay, opposite charges of polar molecules, like the water we said, the oxygen partially negative and the hydrogen atoms partially positive, can interact to form hydrogen bonds. We all already know that the opposite charges, they are attracted to each other. So what is the hydrogen bond? Hydrogen bond. It's an attraction. Yes, we said oppositely charging, so it's an attraction between a slightly positive hydrogen atom. This is why it is called a hydrogen bond, because the hydrogen atoms are a major participant in this process or in this bond, and a slightly negative atom. The slightly negative atom is often oxygen or nitrogen. So again, a hydrogen bond is an attraction between a slightly positive hydrogen atom and a slightly negative atom. often oxygen or nitrogen. Hydrogen bonds are found between molecules of water, also between the structures of proteins and DNA, so they are important. Great. An individual hydrogen bond, the individual hydrogen bonds are 20 times weaker than the typical covalent bond. Can you imagine this? But they are relatively strong among water molecules because we are talking about hydrogen bonds between millions of water molecules. As a result, a large amount of energy is needed to overcome the attractions between the water molecules. Without hydrogen bonds, water would boil at much lower temperature than it does. You know, we already know that the water boils at 100 degrees centigrade. This is because of the presence of hydrogen bonds between the molecules of water. But without the hydrogen bonds, the water would boil at much lower temperature than it does. Why? Because less energy would be needed to change the liquid water into water vapor, change the state from liquid to gas. Water is a liquid at room temperature because of hydrogen bond. And thank God that water is a liquid in the room temperature because this is the temperature that supports most life on Earth, only because of hydrogen bonds. Hydrogen bonds are responsible for three important properties of water, which are number one, high specific heat, number two, cohesion, and three, adhesion. Look at this figure right here. This is water molecule, another water molecule, and a third, fourth, and last one. Can you see the slightly positive charge and the slightly negative charge, how they are attracted? This is a hydrogen bond. So now you can imagine how all the molecules of water in a cup of water, they are attracted to each other or bonded by hydrogen bonds. Okay. The first property of water due to the presence of hydrogen bond is high specific heat. What is the meaning of this? It means that the water resists changes in temperature. Yes, water must absorb more heat energy to increase in temperature. This property is very important in your cells or in the cells of any living organism. Why? Because the process that produces usable chemical energy in the cells, it releases a great deal of heat. So the water absorbs this heat, which helps to regulate the cell temperature because it will not increase in temperature immediately. No, the water resisted changes in temperature, so it will absorb more heat energy to increase in temperature. So when this energy is released, the water will absorb it instead of setting the cell or damaging the cell. The second property due to the presence of hydrogen bond is called cohesion. Cohesion, it's the attraction among the molecules of a substance, the same substance. Cohesion from hydrogen bonds make water molecules stick to each other. As you can see, this when the water form beds, these are called beds, or these are groups of water molecules. The water looks like they are collecting each other or holding each other. So this is the attraction among the molecules of a substance, such as a recently washed cars. Cohesion also produces surface tension. This is very important, which makes a kind of skin on water. Can you see this cockroach or this spider, even this pin? They are on the surface of the water due to surface tension. Then the third one, this is called adhesion. Adhesion. Adhesion is the attraction among the molecules, but of different substances. In other words, the water molecules stick to other molecules. How this is important? Actually, adhesion helps plants transport water from the roots to the leaves, as you can see here, because water molecules stick to the sides of the vessels that carry water. Okay, then what? Let's look at these two test tubes. The one to your right, it contains mercury. The one to your left, it contains water, but it is colored in order to see it clearly. So let's look about the tube to the left side. On the left, the water surface is curved down. As you can see, the curve is down because the water has greater adhesion than cohesion. The water stick to the sides of the tube. This is why it is curved down. It looks like it is climbing from the sides. Okay, what about the right one? The surface of mercury is curved up because the mercury has greater cohesion. The molecules tend to hold on to each other than to other surfaces. The surface of mercury is curved up because mercury has a greater cohesion than adhesion. This is very important. Then there is a question that says, compare how are hydrogen bonds similar to ionic bonds. Hydrogen bonds are attractions due to charged regions. Ionic bonds are formed by the attraction of oppositely charged ions like NaCl, if you remember. Then let's move to another title which says, many compounds dissolve in water. Yes, molecules and ions cannot take part in chemical processes inside the cells unless they dissolve in water, because our cells are mainly made of water. So anything, any chemical process that will take place in our body or in any living body, it needs to have molecules and ions that can dissolve in water. Important materials such as sugars and oxygen cannot be transported from one part of an organism to another unless they are dissolved in blood or plant sap or other water-based fluids. Yes, you might be surprised that blood is a water-based fluid. Also, the plant sap, this is the juice of the plants inside the plant's body. Okay, solute, solvent, and solution. These are three terms that you must know. When one substance dissolves in another, a solution is formed. So when you get a cup of water and put some sugar or some salt in it and you dissolve it, so you have made a solution. A solution is a mixture of substances that is the same through, so they are mixed together well. This is called a homogeneous mixture. Homogeneous mixture. So when you add sugar to water and stir it, can you see the sugar after you stir it? No. This is because this is a homogeneous mixture. What about sand? When you mix sand and water, the sand do not dissolve in water. So you can see both of them, right? This is called heterogeneous mixture. Heterogeneous mixture. Let's move on. So in any solution, we have two terms, a solvent and a solute. Solvent and a solute. So what is the solvent? The solvent is the substance that is present in greater amount, like the water, for example, and that dissolves another substance. So the substance that is present in greater amount and that dissolves the other substance, this is the solvent. Then what? What is the solute? This is the substance that dissolves in the solvent, like sugar. For example, a solute is a substance that dissolves in a solvent. Okay. Then we have the term concentration. Many substances dissolve in water in your body. So what is the solution's concentration? It is the amount of solute dissolved in a certain amount of solvent. Solvent, like the water. Solute, like the sugar. So the amount of solute dissolved in a certain amount of solvent, this is the solution's concentration. The liquid part of your blood, it is called the plasma. And this plasma is about 95% water. So this is the solvent, right? So the solvent in plasma is water, and all the substances dissolved in it, they are solutes. This is very important. Most of these solutes sugars, and proteins dissolve in water of blood plasma because they are polar. Do you remember the polar molecules? Polar molecules dissolve in water because the attraction between the water molecules and the solute molecules are greater than the attraction among the solute molecules. So why actually the polar molecules dissolve in water? Because the attraction between the water molecules, which are polar, and the solute molecules, which are also polar, is greater than the attraction among the solute molecules itself. Similarly, so ionic compounds such as NaCl, do you remember? The table salt dissolves in water because the charges of water molecules attract the charges of the ion. So they dissolve, they break down the attraction force between the ionic compounds. The water molecules surround each ion and pull the compound apart. So this is like disintegrating the compound, the ions from each other. What about non-polar substances such as fats and oils? They rarely dissolve in water. You might have done this experiment before. Get a cup, put some water, then add some oil. They will never mix together. Non-polar molecules do not have charged regions, so they are not attracted to polar molecules, so they will not dissolve in water. Polar molecules and the non-polar molecules tend to separate. Oil and water don't mix, like the previous picture. Non-polar molecules. So we said that the polar molecules will dissolve in polar solvents like water. What about non-polar molecules? They will dissolve also, but in non-polar solvents. Like what? For example, some vitamins such as vitamin E, they are non-polar and they dissolve in the fat in your body because fats are also non-polar. Some compounds break into ions when they dissolve in water. Yes, so we have two terms, acids and bases. So what's an acid? An acid is a compound that releases a proton, which is a hydrogen ion, H+1. When they dissolve in water, an acid is a compound that releases a proton or a hydrogen ion when it dissolves in water. An acid increases the concentration of protons or hydrogen positive ions in a solution. So the acids, they add more hydrogen plus or hydrogen positive ions in the water. What about bases? Bases are compounds that remove hydrogen positive ions from a solution. So when a base dissolves in water, the solution has low hydrogen positive ion concentration. So now we will talk about something called a solution's acidity, how the solution is acidic or how acidic the solution is, or the H positive ion concentration is measured by the pH scale, The pH is usually between 0 and 14. A solution with pH of 0 is very acidic with high concentration of hydrogen ions. So the solution of a pH 14, this is very basic. So this is a very low hydrogen ion concentration. So the solutions with pH 7 in the middle, this is neutral. Neutral means neither acidic nor basic. Okay, this is the pH scale. This is the part, the acidic part from 0 to 6. So as you go to 0, this is more acidic. Actually, the stomach acid pH is between 1 and 3. Do you remember the hydrochloric acid, which break down food in our stomach? Yes, this is between 1 and 3. As you can see here, the concentration of hydrogen ions varies depending on how acidic or basic the solution is. Look at this part. So as you go to the left, as you go to the 0, the concentration of hydrogen ions increases. This is high hydrogen ion concentration at the 0, and the low hydrogen ion concentration, this is in the middle. Then let's move to the second part. This is when you go up the 7 till 14. So this is more basic. Actually, the bile, this is what is produced by our gallbladder. Bile pH between 8 and 9. The concentration of the ions, as you can see, as you move to 14, this is more basic, so means less hydrogen ion concentration. What about 7 itself? Pure water pH 7. This is neutral, neither acidic nor basic. Okay. Some compounds form acids or bases. Many organisms, including humans, this is a very important part, need to keep their pH within a very narrow range, around the neutral, which is 7.0 pH. Some organisms need a very different pH range. Let's see. The azalea plant thrives in acidic soil, pH 4.5. Can you imagine this? The azalea plant thrives in acidic soil, pH 4.5. And there is a microorganism that is called Picrophilus. Picrophilus, it survives best at an extremely acidic pH of 0.7. Can you imagine this? Some other living things, they can survive in extreme different pH range. Like the azalea plant, it thrives in acidic soil, pH 4.5, and the microorganism Picrophilus, it survives best at an extremely acidic environment, pH 0.7. For all of these organisms, pH must be tightly controlled or the organism will die. One way pH is regulated in organisms by substances called buffers. Substances called buffers. Buffers are substances used to regulate the pH. Okay, so a buffer is a compound that can bind to an H positive ion when the concentration of the H positive ion increases and releases an H positive ion or a proton when the hydrogen ion concentration decreases. So if the ion concentration is very high, the buffer make it lower. This is in case of more acidic. And if the hydrogen ion concentration is very low, actually the buffer increases the H positive ion. In other words, a buffer locks up hydrogen ions and helps to maintain homeostasis. So it helps to regulate the pH to maintain homeostasis. For humans, in humans, for example, the normal pH of human blood is between 7.35 to 7.45. So it is a slightly basic, just a small change in the pH can disrupt processes in your cells. And a blood pH greater than 7.8 or less than 6.8, even for a short time, this is deadly. So the buffers in your blood prevent any large changes in blood pH. This is important to our body. I hope you understood this session. See you in the next episode. Thank you guys and goodbye.